Welcome to another episode of 10K Hours with Michael Pecchia and Justin Goby Fields. Today we have Sean Faden, visual effects supervisor for the next Mulan, releasing July 24th, 2020. Welcome, Sean.
Thank you for having me, guys.
We're excited.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really good. Let's do a little backstory on Sean. He's a visual effects supervisor. Films that go from Fifth Element to Titanic, Fight Club, Godzilla, Grinch, Triple X, Day After Tomorrow, Pirates, Dead Man's Chest, Captain America, First Avenger, Girl with a Dragon Tattoo, Fast and Furious 6, Game of Thrones, Power Ranger, and as I said earlier, Mulan.
That's such a small list. It's nothing.
Just a
no,
couple.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah. it's been an interesting journey, that's for sure.
It's quite a pedigree of films, man.
A lot of different things.
Yeah.
It is now. Letting everybody know, you just didn't just jump in as a visual effects supervisor.
No.
So I noticed on Fifth Element you did miniatures.
Correct. Yeah, I was. It was the one thing I, actually took from engineering school that was a direct application to the actual workforce, because I did engineering school and realized I didn't actually want to be an engineer, but I had learned AutoCAD, and that was a job position that was open at Digital Domain at the time, which was a miniature designer using AutoCAD to create parts that were going to get laser cut and then given to the miniature makers, the guys who are really, those are the real talents, because those are the ones who say, well, if you give me this, then I can make
this.
Yeah.
But I did a lot of pieces for Fifth Element. The thing I worked probably the most on was the Floss in Paradise.
Oh, nice,
the big cruise ship. So I did most of the windows for that, because it was a lot of tedious stuff, but it was a lot of working directly with the miniature designers and with Mark Stetson as well, which was super cool to kind of
very talented.
Yeah, he's amazing, and I've known him a long time now because of that. But I would take like wax paper and I would go onto the rough mold when it was just basically just a form, and then draw where the windows would be, and then take that back and try to do all the measurements and try to actually transcribe whatever that curve was into something that would make sense. Do test cuts. It was very iterative because there was no scanning back then to make sure.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, what year is this happening in?
This was August of 1996.
Nice.
So that's early digital. That is kind of the first step into the digital realm. I don't even think anybody realized the miniatures would go away.
I didn't when I started the job, which is so weird. I mean, I only did that job for about 3 months because I started. Les Ecker hired me, he's great, and I was doing the job, and at some point I was doing Dante's Peak miniatures. I did a lot of stuff for Titanic miniatures as well.
Oh, cool.
And Fifth Element, and then Les was like, I think things are kind of winding down. You should meet literally across the street, because Digital Domain was, the miniature building was on one side of the street, and they had commercials there, and then across the street was all the digital feature people. Mm-hmm. And I went across the street and met everybody on a Friday, and I started on Monday.
Oh, wow.
On the integration team.
Well, that was quick.
Yeah, well, I guess we had a good meeting, and it was cool, because it was like, okay, because Les realized that I think things were going to be slowing in the miniature world, and he wanted me to sort of stay within, or just to have a new life basically within the company, and that was a good opportunity. But I ended up still, because no one was there to run the AutoCAD or to run the laser cam, I still was moonlighting for probably the next 4 or 5 months, still running back. So I would be tracking on Titanic, tracking a shot on Titanic, and then I'd run across the street, kick off a cut that might take 3 or 4 hours, and then go back to my job, and then go back and when it was ready, and then sort of, so I was doing both for a little while there.
Yeah.
We call that double dipping, because, when there's work, there's work, and you got to get it done. I mean, that's just a bit Titanic. And at that time, that was the biggest movie out, and an intro to it. And everybody was working on that in town.
It was, and it kind of spoiled me, because, with all my family, extended family, when you say, oh, working on Titanic, or I worked on Titanic, and I was like, oh my goodness, so that's because that's it was so in the news, and so everyone was very aware of that project, and then of course it was a huge hit and all that stuff. And then movies after that, there was nothing that could sort of come close to that level of
it was king for a very long time.
Yeah.
It was top of the list. Yeah.
And James keeps on making these epic films, and
Oh,
they're always cutting edge.
Yeah.
So you were riding that edge into the next future, because there weren't any schools at that time for visual effects digital.
Right.
It was if you knew AutoCAD, and then they kind of fit you into that realm.
Yeah, I mean so the miniature thing was sort of the foot in the door, and once I was there, I definitely had to kind of just learn everything else just on the job. And yeah, because when I was at UCLA Engineering, I met Steve Fredericks, who was like the CFO of DD, and because one of our classes was doing I was in a business class, and that business class was talking to local businesses, and they gave this whole presentation. I was like, this is like a super cool job. I didn't even know this kind of thing existed, really. I mean, I wasn't really thinking visual effects when I was not sure what I was going to be. Like I went through all of engineering school, and I was like, shit, I don't know if I really want to be an engineer. It just didn't feel like it was the right thing. I needed something that was more creative. And when I talked to him, I said, do you guys hire creative engineering types? He said, you kidding me? That's our ideal candidate. Because back then there was, and I ended up working with people who were like JPL, former JPL employees, or Matthew Butler, who I was my boss on Titanic, and we ended up working on a bunch of shows after that. But he was like a graduate from MIT, from fluid mechanics engineering, and so he was. So I felt like I was in kind of with a lot of similar kind of thinking people.
You talk the same language too.
Yeah.
We found, we did kind of a lot of us bonded over the fact that like we were sort of applying. Engineering is really about learning how to learn. Because they hit you with a new concept every week in every one of your classes, so you're just having to kind of learn quickly, and so you get into this mode of being able to pick things up a little quicker. And also engineering, especially the last couple of years of engineering, are all about project management and project kind of things. And you have groups of 6 students, and they're all doing a project, and you pick this thing, and you pick that thing, and you kind of learn how to delegate, and you learn how to kind of figure out what people's strengths are. And so even though it was some obscure engineering,
It's perfect training for a future job, for sure.
Perfect training.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
for the job you didn't know you wanted.
Yeah, I know. So all that kind of applied to, as my career kept kind of growing, I kept realizing, oh, geez, this actually is relevant. Even though I don't use the material strength formulas and things like that I might have learned.
Yeah.
Applications of basic physics, or applications of sort of project strategy, that is very applicable.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in a shorter amount of time than actually building a real building or creating something else, which it was aesthetic looking, and you had to get it all done in a shorter amount of time. So then you really figured out how to manage and hit deadlines.
Yeah. There's a whole, visual effects and production in general is knowing where the shortcuts are legal, knowing where you can cut those corners. Sometimes you screw up, and sometimes you nail it, and you go, wow, I'm glad we didn't waste time on that one aspect. And sometimes you go, oh, maybe we should have spent a little more time exploring that branch.
Right.
So that we would be prepared when the director says, oh, actually, I don't want it to be this way. I wanted it to be, this way. And you go, oh, well, that was a path that we ignored.
We cut off, yeah.
So.
Jumping in, just to give a little background once again, what was your favorite film that you've worked on?
That I've worked on, Fight Club is.
And nice.
And that's been my favorite.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Well, Fight Club, it was a really special movie at Digital Domain, because it was a really small team. and Kevin Mack was our supervisor.
Oh, I know Kevin.
Yeah.
Yeah, I met Kevin in Portugal. Yeah, he's all into VR now. It's really great. Yeah.
Yeah. No, he's found this whole other career in blazing that trail, which is
he's so nice, so nice. Yeah,
he is, and definitely one of my mentors in this business. But it was Kevin Mack, Judith Crow, Matthew Butler, Kerry Villegas, Dan Lemon, David Prescott, myself, Vernon Wilbert.
You have a really good memory. That's amazing. I was just like, wow.
Well, these are people I worked with a lot.
Okay.
But I'm just remembering, like these are the guys that, and so I know that like Matthews and Dan Lemon spent a lot of time, I think, on the opening shot, the flying through the brain stuff. We only did like 3 or 4 shots in the movie, maybe 5. I think it was the opening brain travel, which is massive.
Yeah, that was so
I think that was David and Matthew mostly working on that, and Dan. And then there was the airplane crash, and that's the part that I worked most on. I did some camera work on once the camera came out of the pore and down the nose. I mean, stupid stuff, but like
is that where the gun shot where it that's such a beautiful shot. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But it was just like this really small team, and everybody knew what they were doing for the most part, and there was no politics and no BS, and everyone could just literally be the best that they could be, And I was animating the airplane ripping apart, so it was I was really starting to kind of feel more confident in my Houdini abilities. I've been working in it since like 97 or like mid 97.
Mm-hmm.
And this is like a year and a half, 2 years later, and this was like a pretty crazy procedural based animation, and I had a lot of fun sort of getting in there and setting up a lot of controls and working directly with Kevin to kind of get all the timing right and everything, and then feeding that to the animators who animated the characters. And that was like, it was just, and then the lighting and learning. I learned a lot on that show because it was such a sort of everyone kind of got to wear a few different hats.
And,
I mean, your list of who's who in visual effects that you just ran down too.
And that was the team. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's some of the top people in the industry today that you guys all started together in this small, intimate team.
Yeah,
is amazing.
I mean, all of us are kind of like offset by a few. Like that's what Matthew was pretty special because he was kind of always sort of one step ahead of me in terms of like he was always my lead, or he was my supervisor when I was a lead, or he was the VFX supervisor when I was the CG soup. So there was always that. I felt like I was learning from him, but also everybody else had that kind of they'd been there either a couple years longer or and I trusted what they had to say. And Judith was great because she was a big part of how that was all put together on Fight Club, and I think she was the VFX supervisor, I think, on that one, and so but there was a lot of interaction and learning about sort of the best ways to render things and the best ways to kind of handle the amount of data we were dealing with. And but yeah, I mean it's we all just kind of hunkered down and just learned from each other and encouraged each other, and it was nice.
I mean, in emphasizing that small team, intimate, with films and making films, you always have a beginning, middle, and end. And I know for me, that was the excitement because you travel this journey when you start a film. It's got all the prep, and then you get your high point, you're working a lot of hours, and then it tapers off and it ends. And it is an emotional curve when you're doing it because you are so intimate and you're putting in long hours with that team. I can't emphasize how that becomes your second family when you're doing these movies.
Yeah,
it really does. Yeah, you do just you kind of you end up sleeping and thinking about you're dreaming about what you do, and you wake up and you see your buddies and you're like, well, let's hit it again today. And that camaraderie is possible in VFX. It's definitely, I would say, more so now than it was even back then, which is weird to say, but like thinking back to say Titanic, where we were all very close, but the teams were so huge. We had, I don't know, maybe 12 or 15 people just on our data integration team, and then there were probably maybe 200 artists at DD that were working on that. I think maybe more. But the experience of Fight Club, which was such a small sort of, there wasn't a lot of shots, but it was a tremendous amount of actual work. And I think that model worked really well, but Digital Domain didn't necessarily take that model on until later, when they started to see some of the boutique company approaches succeeding, where you have maybe a few less artists, but just maybe, focus more on having good quality artists, people who can solve a lot of problems
efficiently and be efficient in the time.
And those teams, the sort of rise of the boutique visual effects company kind of happened, I would say probably between in the 2000s, like say 2000, 2010, and I think Digital Domain started to kind of, and they had it already. They had it in their commercial division, but they started to kind of slowly, I think, integrate that into their feature workflow as well.
Yeah, that era is definitely one where you start seeing a lot of smaller houses.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Get created and pop up. Yeah.
Yeah, and I had gone to Asylum in 2004, and they were already growing when I got there, but I was witness to the fact that you could be successful with smaller teams. And something about that camaraderie in the smaller teams, where people are just sort of pushing and pulling work and handing off things, and you know how to do this and you know how to do that, but that also can get dangerous, because if you try to pile too much work onto that team, it breaks it. And that's happened to me before too. Yeah. I've been in those situations too, where it's like, I've said yes too many times.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's really finding that balance, and I get it. I had jumped around from large facility to small facility to actually get that. Where a larger facility, you kind of did one specific, task, and then that would get exhausted, and then jumping into, a smaller company to get that intimacy that you're talking about is so important, and it kept your skills sharp.
Yeah, I when I left Digital Domain, I was scared, because Digital Domain was this, beautiful nest of support and of talent, and I really felt like, I could do no wrong with all these really great people around me. And then going to Asylum, which was exciting, it was like, okay, wow, they don't have a Doug Roble, they don't have this sort of software support bunker that Digital Domain had, and then they don't have nearly the amount of artists or supervisors or whatever experience that you're hoping to kind of keep learning from, but and one thing they didn't have was Storm, which back then it was called Voxel Bitch, but that was Storm was Alan Kapler's volumetric renderer, which was really the predecessor to it led to the i3D technology, which is now something else within Houdini, but it's the volumetric tool. And having that at DD was, we were on the cutting edge having that. No one else had anything even close. And going to Asylum was like, okay, well, how do we do this? And then it was because Houdini had integrated the i3D tech based on Alan's work, and then I was able to make something that was not nearly as good as what Alan helped me a little bit, but it was like he gave me definitely gave me some hints and some tips, but I was able to make something that was workable, that I could actually do quasi simulations and things like that, and feel like, okay, I can still create something. And this is on a much smaller scale, but being able to achieve that gave me a lot of confidence that, okay, well, I can actually still be successful even without
the large team.
Large team.
Totally understand. So let me ask you, what film had the biggest hurdles for you that you worked on?
I would say probably The Day After Tomorrow was one of the most challenging movies that I worked on. You probably asked a lot of people I worked with on that movie, and you'd probably get a similar answer.
Similar.
I mean, it was just happened to be that it was in 2003, 2002 to 2004. It was about a year and a half that I worked on that, and that movie was right at the time when CG was just starting to be good enough that people were saying, you know what, let's just do it as a big CG effect and not relying on a practical element for it or whatever. And now I feel like we have a much healthier kind of mix of CG and practical these days, where we can actually really weigh what makes the most sense at this point. But you know, I think we swung for the fences in the mid 90s, and you had a lot of kind of movies that sort of went too far for the technology.
It was definitely an experimental era. You know what I mean? Like, I remember when like Twister came out, and that was amazing looking. You know, and this is also around, you know, when did Jurassic Park come out?
94.
94, yeah. Jurassic Park still holds up to this day.
It does. Well, because they did a
bit of both.
That and they sort of used it where it was strongest, and and what they did do as CG looked really good for the time too. So, but we had the challenge technically to do all these different like massive effects things, like, you know, water and snow and hurricanes and tornadoes and ice, and we had the technical challenge, and then there was also just a very kind of, it was a difficult movie politically. We had just a lot of difficulties getting things to be seen as positive, and it was just so it became a kind of negative veil over our work. And so to be a young CG supervisor that was like, I'd done a couple movies up to that point in that role, but this was by far the biggest role that I had. And I was doing the hurricanes, and I was doing the tornadoes, and I was doing, I was leading the previs teams, and I was doing the ice sequence at the beginning. And, you know, some of the work got pulled at some point, and we still finished the tornadoes, and we finished obviously all the water and stuff like that. I wasn't a part of that necessarily, but it was just this weird dynamic of trying to do the best you can do. And I think we had a really great team, a lot of really good artists on that show. We created a lot of groundbreaking work, but always kind of feeling like it was never good enough was really difficult. And it's a lesson I've learned to, you know, now that I am working from the studio side, trying to always make sure that the vendors and their teams feel like they are a part of the process, and never throwing people under the bus, you know, because you just want to feel like everyone is trying. You know, everyone's trying, and it's
that's bad juju. If you start throwing people under the bus, you're not doing your job right.
The stuff is not easy. The stuff is not easy, and you know, it wasn't like. It just was there was just some bad juju that we had to kind of work through, and by the end it was fine, and we delivered great work, and I think the movie turned out really nicely, and there's no ill will. It's just that I took from that experience that it's important to remain positive, even if there's a problem, even if something that your vendor is doing isn't really working, that you work with them to try to figure out what it is that's actually missing, and you work with the director to figure out, well, okay, so maybe you're not giving us exactly what, you know, the most concrete vision of what you're looking for, but we're going to work together to try to find out what that is.
Yeah, I think everybody wants to, you know, when you're working on a team like that that's full of passionate people, everybody wants to give you what you're looking for. But it's like taking the time and figuring it out, and talking to them as a vendor is like a major thing too.
I find that, you know, talking through the problem and being honest with people is, you know, again, sometimes you're going to hear stuff you don't want to hear, but
you got to kill your babies.
You got to. I mean, well,
it's as terrible as it sounds. It's true though.
You have to. Sometimes you got to take your medicine, and it isn't always perfect and sweet, but you have to talk through it.
And that helps you look for the solution, right? Focusing on the positive, looking for the solution. But like you said, you got to take your medicine and put your big boy pants on.
Yeah. I mean, all it does in the end is help you grow as an artist. So
with an experience like that, did you ever get the urge that you wanted to leave the industry because, you know, experiences like that? Did that ever go through your mind?
You know, it's funny. I left Digital Domain after that movie, but it wasn't because of that movie. I had decided maybe 6 months before the end of it to leave. And my daughter was born like on my last. It was a crazy day. My daughter Joelle was born the day that we finished Day After Tomorrow. So
well, that's a celebration.
it was. So it was the end of a year and a half of a very difficult movie, but again, rewarding movie. The end of 7 years at Digital Domain, and the birth of my kid, and like the beginning of this new journey, because I was going to be leaving. So all this was like happening at once. It was very emotional, But
Yeah.
But I never really felt like I want to get out of this industry.
Right.
I've definitely have had moments where I'm like, I need to stop doing so many commercials, or I need to maybe leave this company. But because visual effects is I always tell people it's just one of these really lucky jobs where, every project is a new experience, and you, just like you're like reading a new book or something. And I'm not even a big reader, but like, every book is a different experience. It's like a different story, and you kind of, but like with visual effects, it's like, well, this movie is about dragons, and this movie is about spaceships, and this movie is about Power Rangers, and this movie is about ancient China, or this, so every one you end up, and I love doing this, is I end up immersing in whatever that world is.
Agree.
Oh,
So
that's the fun part, right?
that is a
Yeah.
fun part.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you get, not only is, every project gets you the sort of the challenge of just learning something new, it's also the challenge of what is this new dynamic of people going to be like that I'm going to work with,
Yeah.
or what is this, the next, I don't know, the next visual effects challenge or breakthrough that me and our team, the visual effects vendors or supervisors that we're going to work with, that we're going to come up with, and that's exciting, So,
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of another industry that is. I mean, because it's a big industry, but it's really not, right? So one company that works on one movie can come up with something that changes the industry forever, and that's insanely cool to me. Like, that's just amazing,
Yeah.
Whenever I look back at, like, a lot of the VFX history and the stuff that we like we were talking earlier about how, like, Indiana Jones and the Star Wars era and that whole genre of films that came out around that time really did affect a lot of people and inspire them to get into the industry.
Totally.
And just being in the same type of field where somebody could make a crazy revelation, and you guys get to try it.
Yep.
And it changes film history, and that's amazing to me. That's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I get so excited whenever I see anything that I was a part of. Like, so and so is. I haven't had the experience where anyone actually like has tried to redo anything that I've worked on or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But when you get to watch the compilations at the end of the year, the VES awards, and you see something you worked on, it's like, it's just cool,
You're like, yes.
But it is it is true. There are a lot of there's so many companies out there now, and there's so many talented artists out there, and you might see something on TikTok or something like that that you go, wow, that person is super creative, and all of a sudden, a director's going to say, can you do like the TikTok?
The inspiration can come from anywhere these days. Yeah,
you never know.
It's pretty amazing.
So, but yeah, in terms of have I ever wanted to leave? No, I think this just feels like such a perfect match for me to be able to be creative and to be able to lead and help and kind of help put pen to paper,
Yeah.
and actually help make the director's vision a reality.
Yeah, it never gets boring.
Yeah.
No,
It's
no.
always a new challenge and new friends.
Yeah.
Each job, new friends. So, how did you jump over to what film did you jump over to the productions, your production side, from being a vendor to
So,
production?
Yeah, I had a couple loan outs. Like I did a loan out, I guess, Nightmare on Elm Street in 2009, and even like smaller projects when I was younger. In 2005, I did Amityville Horror. So these like smaller movies, and then in 2015, when I left Pixelmundo to go do Power Rangers, was the first time that I actually said, all right, officially, I'm like out of the vendor side. I'm going to work from the studio side, And it was definitely a conscious decision to not try. I mean, I don't think I was ready early, much earlier. Maybe a couple of years earlier I could have tried, but my kids were young, and I didn't really. And they still, even until 2015, my son was 8, and my daughter was 12, and that's still pretty young. But I was lucky enough to, most of my career when they were young, be local and doing commercials. And
that's great.
So like,
yeah, that's important.
Yeah, so the longest I was ever away, I think I was gone for 9 weeks on A Good Day to Die Hard. I was in Budapest, so I was gone. I didn't come back for 9 weeks, so that was pretty hard. But I'm glad I waited a little bit to actually make the jump.
Yeah, it is, and everyone doesn't realize those long hours and being away, how it affects everybody. It just doesn't affect you, but it affects your family, your children. Yeah. It's finding that balance and you being a unit, as you're a unit in the studio, but it's more important that you're a unit at home and have great communication to balance that out.
Yeah. Yeah, and I tried to, when I can, take my kids to school in the morning or get them, make them breakfast or whatever, even if it's, just to be able to see them for 15, 20 minutes in the morning. If I have a 10 or 12 hour day ahead of me, it's so worth it to just have that little moment, to see everybody.
Yeah.
Can relate to that.
And getting home late for dinner every night, and when I was working on Mulan, I was, going from, Burbank to the west side, and it was like, an hour plus.
Oh, there's like 5 hours of traffic right there.
Well, I was in the car for over 2 hours every day just driving. So, and I'd get home after 8, and thankfully my family generally would wait for dinner, and they didn't always like having a late dinner, but it meant a lot to me,
Yeah, that's nice.
It is important.
Yeah.
Now, have you been able to take your family on shoots and stuff sometimes, if it's allowed, or you can figure it out with school schedules and
I haven't done anything that bold, but on Mulan, we had, my wife and kids came out to New Zealand when I was in the North Island. When I was in Auckland for all of prep and everything. And just before we started shooting, they came out for about 3 weeks, and we had a nice apartment, and they all lived with us, lived with me, and that was cool. And then my wife came out once, when I was working in the South Island for like a week, but it's hard because it was gone for 7 months the whole time.
It's long.
That's long.
So I went like 4 months without seeing my kids, and about 9 weeks without seeing my wife, and that was it's hard.
It is, and once again, trying to keep that communication, dialogue open, and when you're working long hours, is balancing that, and then you're talking time zones too, which is another challenge.
Yeah. Well, New Zealand actually is lucky in that sense because it's kind of like tomorrow, but 3 hours behind or something like that. I don't know. So it's sort of like talking to the East Coast or something, or talking to Hawaii. So it's not that bad, but and my family's used to the long hours, and my hours were actually probably longer when I was working on a lot of commercial. Like when I worked at Asylum and at Method and at Pixamundo, it was sort of a kind of a grab bag of work. So it was sort of, I might be working on 2 or 3 or 4 commercials at once, or I'd be working on that plus a feature, or that plus a feature plus a ride film, or like who knows. Like there was just all these different things going on. So it was very easy to have a reason to stay late because this now has its deadline, and then next week now this has its deadline, so they just kind of leapfrog off, and you feel like you never get that downtime, and that was a big reason for sort of shifting from one company to another. Was like I just had to kind of break the cycle of like, okay, this is too much, it worked for a while, and I was able to definitely gain a lot of experience doing those things, and it's sort of trial by fire, and you're just pushing so much work through that your experience is growing whether you like it or not, and but my family was pretty used to it.
I can't say how important that is. Looking at Mulan now, we've got director Nikki Caro, right? Whale Rider, North Country, Zookeeper's wife, so talented. You've got cinematographer Mandy Walker on the show, powerhouse of women right there. Right, it's that. I mean, even talking powerhouse on the Disney side, you got Mimi Steele overseeing it. I mean, just strong woman after strong woman after strong woman.
Yeah, and our visual effects producer, Di Giorgiudi, was an awesome, very strong woman too. So she was like my rock during the whole process. We were on the movie for almost 3 years, you know. So, and yeah, Nikki's great. She definitely had a vision that really didn't change much from day one. And Mandy was amazing too, and you know, Mandy had done a few more visual effects projects, so she definitely was kind of a good go-between for myself and Nikki. Sometimes there were times when Nikki wasn't, especially in the beginning, where she wasn't sure if all that visual effects stuff is really necessary to really be worried about right now, and
Right.
Mandy would step in and say, well, maybe we should, you know, and it was good. So we kind of all reached a point where we all realize each other's contribution, and the reason why I might be stepping into a conversation to say, well, maybe we should consider X, Y, and Z. It was a, you know, fine line between stepping on. I didn't want to step on any creative, but because the creative and the visual effects are so closely interwoven, you have to sometimes do that. But it's, you know, like it's different on every show, and we ended up with a really good relationship on that movie. All of us did, and it was. But I think that for Nikki, because she hadn't done a lot of heavy visual effects movies, being able to kind of let go sometimes and say, well, this is a bit of an unknown. Let's see what the visual effects can actually, you know, insert into this moment, and being open to that. And she definitely got there.
That's great.
But it was that was one of my challenges, was just to not come on too strong too fast, and because it's tricky, you know. You want to come in. It's a big job. It's a job I was in love with from the beginning. I knew it was going to be really cool, and I didn't want to jeopardize that relationship, but at the same time I had to do my job, which is to still state what's important. And so it's all about timing and being able to kind of come in at the right time with these things.
About how long were you guys out in New Zealand?
I was out there for 7 months. Was the whole kind of prep and production.
Okay.
I was in New Zealand for probably about 5 months. Out of that, let's say I was in Auckland for about 5 months. The other 2 months was split between China and the South Island. I think we were in the South Island for about 4 weeks, and then we were in China for about 5 weeks.
And I know Weta did some stuff for Mulan as well. Yeah.
Yeah, Weta was a huge part of the show. We had 4 major vendors, and then we brought on. So it was Weta, Sony ImageWorks, and Image Engine, and Framestore. Those were our 4 initial visual effects vendors.
Staples in the industry.
Yeah, they're all amazing. And then halfway through, we brought on Crafty Apes, who I'd worked with before. I have friends there too, and they had worked with me on Power Rangers, and so yeah, it was basically those 5 vendors that did the work, and Weta did
a lot of the costume, right? Yeah.
Well, what they did was all the China, ancient China sort of city work, and they also did our digital hawk, and our digital witch, and they sort of developed the murmuration work, which was actually the murmuration stuff ended up being shared by ImageWorks and Framestore.
Yeah.
All 3 of them actually did hero bird murmuration shots.
Yeah. I think I was actually I think I was in New Zealand at the same time as you were.
Oh, what were you there for?
I was just visiting. You know, I have a couple friends that work in the digital side and the practical side, and I had just finished doing like a lecture at like a school in Australia. And I was just like, you know, it's really close to New Zealand. Let me just hop on a plane and go.
You went to Wellington?
Yeah, I went to Wellington and hung out for like 3 or 4 days and got to, you know, walk around, meet Richard, you know, a couple times, you know, and talk to my practical friends that are doing a lot of, you know, miniature stuff. And they had, I think before that, they had just won like the VES award for Blade Runner and stuff like that. So, and it's funny because we shot a podcast with them at the old studio right before they went and got that award. So they were here in town.
Oh, nice.
And got to, talk to them. And great team. And I remember going through.
Did you see some of the costume work?
Oh, yeah.
So when you said costume, I was thinking like digital.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, oh, yeah, of course. Well, the workshop.
Well, they do everything over there.
Yeah, the Weta workshop, we visited them once, I think, during one of our scouts. We went while they were kind of in the middle of building. I mean, they made all the armor. They made all the weapons.
Isn't that such a fun place to walk through?
And and Richard Taylor was there and walked us through. And it's incredible. And really the work they did it shows up in the movie. Like
it's stunning.
I take it for granted because I was seeing it so much.
You're just like,
I'm just like, well, that's the costume. but I think if you kind of take a step back and watch the movie for what it is, and you go, wow, that's the detail in the armor.
And the amount that they produce is just
the weapons
insane.
And the sword, Mulan's sword is incredible.
And they really forged those swords. Like, they have a sword master on call.
Yeah.
In that facility, which is absolutely amazing.
And I mean, giving a little backstory on that, we met, even though Nikki was greenlit, she still had to make a presentation early on of her vision to Disney. They had greenlit it, but they still needed to see her vision of what the armor would look like, what the costume, what the bird would look like. And I know we worked together on that, helping you design that, came up with that. But it was surprising to see that they would greenlight, but still, hey, we still need to see your vision before we officially open the doors and let you guys run.
I think it was just such a big movie. I mean, they had utmost confidence in Nikki and of course, but because it was just such a large scale production, and money was about to be spent in so many different directions. I think that they just it makes sense, and they knocked it out of the park with the presentation. It was a combination of there was a bunch of costumes that they showed. There were kind of whips, and then there was these amazing moving 2.5D concept art pieces that Grant Major, our production designer, had a team of artists doing really cool key scene art that we ended up having all that in our room, in our war room, or in our wherever we were working during the year and a half.
I loved that you called it a war room. That's amazing.
We had it all wrapping around our room, and I would constantly look at like, oh, well, this is a shot we're working on, and this is the thing. And go, holy crap! Like we are staying on target with that. There were a couple that kind of shifted, but for the most part, it really stayed true to that imagery. And then we had about an 8-minute previs that we showed, and then we had a sculptural, really beautiful maquette of Mulan on Black Wind, which is what
I helped with.
You guys did. And that was, I don't know, I think the horse was probably like 18 inches.
It was a large.
It was big.
It was big, and it took a while to.
And it was gorgeous.
Paint up and print and make.
And there was also
amazing.
And we made the medallion, which is really cool, and then the Phoenix. And the Phoenix was a key element of it. The Phoenix is the spiritual guide for Mulan in the movie, and it was a real important piece to to the puzzle. And
I'm guessing not voiced by Eddie Murphy.
No, it's not.
As much as I would love to see that version as well, but
it's funny because I remember when we were in early production, they were actually saying that like Kevin Hart was rumored to be doing.
That would have been good too.
That actually would have been pretty good.
Yeah.
So we worked for those 3 months between April and the mid-July presentation. We worked with your team, and those guys were great, and it was a lot of back and forth. They used a lot of reference of real birds, and in the end, the Phoenix went through a few different design changes after whatever you guys had done, but then it all swung back to basically be the design that we had in the beginning. We shifted the color scheme,
of course,
but the shape and the general kind of vibe was the same.
Yeah,
because I think everyone just was in love with the original thing.
I mean, the guys really did love working on that, and just give a shout out to two talented artists were David Mason and Kyle Brown. Really kicked it for you. I mean, long hours, same thing early on to nail that. But it was beautiful. So they were proud. I was proud to be part of it. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. And again, that imagery had legs. It really, like, you know, the amount of times that was sort of passed around, sent out in emails as this is the look, you know, like it lived, and it was big on my wall right next to my desk, you know, and I looked at it every day to go, okay, are we doing this right, you know? But yeah, it was I think that was a really good idea for Nikki to push for all these things, you know, early on, because it, you know, having that kind of roadmap, especially on a movie this complicated, is what you need. It ends up being a lifeline for you when things go sideways, you know, and not that it went sideways in the movie, but like you want to have that safety. You want to have those guardrails, you know, as you're going through a very big production.
I mean, it's
the funnel that keeps you going,
kinda,
right?
Yeah.
To the point, yeah.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you guys really answered the what, where, why, and how early on, you and Grant, of creating that vision. So you kind of have that template, which is so important, and then everybody can get on that same page.
Yeah. Yeah. And we did, you know, there was another one that we did. There was, you know, so Mulan has her chi effect, and that was another one that we did early tests on. We photographed. Actually, it was our storyboard artist Jane Wu. We had her jumping around in the park in Burbank, and we shot her on a Phantom camera. And Nikki just posted what we would probably call the sort of the coolest version of the kind of post effect that was done on it. And Scanline, I worked with Brian Grill and Klaus Henke. They did this really kick-ass effect in Scanline. So, you know, in terms of fluid dynamics and all that, these guys,
that's what they're known for. Yeah,
they know a lot, but that's one thing that they just knocked it out of the park on. And it was, as she's leaping through the air, they match moved her body motion and then used that to drive a fluid sim that then drove like a distortion, and it was all trying to be kind of photographic, all trying to use basically natural lens effects, but then just subtly kind of pulling those through the sim. And in the end, it was gorgeous. We loved it, and then I think we just kind of realized that maybe it was just a little too, even though it was way more subtle than any kind of effects-y kind of look you might see in a typical movie. It still was a little too much. It was just sort of taking Nikki out of the kind of the moment. So it's a really cool effect, but again, it was one of those things where we did the work early. And it was enough to say, okay, well, you know what? Actually, for the movie, let's just shoot it with a lens that's going to give us a similar kind of
vibe,
you know, chromatic aberration, a little bit of like vignetting on the edges, but let's not go crazy. And you know, it saved the production a lot of money, because now you don't have, you know, 30 new shots at $30,000 a shot.
Right.
You know,
it adds up fast.
They're just in camera, you know, and then when other ones we had to kind of add the effect to, those are cheap. Those are cheap to do.
It's only $30,000 a shot. It's,
but to apply like an overall lens effect is like maybe $1,500 too.
Yeah.
It's not a lot. So so that ended up being another area where you say the who, what, why, where, how, figuring some of that stuff out early really benefits the production. It benefits everybody.
Can't emphasize that enough. And once again, it pulls everybody onto the same page, and the expectation on set of what you got to do.
It saves millions of dollars and in man hours.
Yeah, if you shot that and then try to figure it out, you're stuck with what you shot. And then you may not be able to be as free to figure out what you guys did early on.
Yep.
So it plan, you know, what's that saying I keep on saying? Fix it and prep, right? It is plan it out. It's so important that it can save you millions on the back end.
Yeah.
And headaches.
And we learned from that you know, even though we shot multiple speeds on the Phantom, I think we learned that the sort of sweet spot for what Nikki and Mandy felt was the best was about 300 frames per second, which we then did tests later on without having to use the Phantom. Well, we did the Phantom one more time where we just sort of did a speed test, and we had apples to apples with the Alexa and the Phantom, and took, I think, maybe 150 frames per second. Phantom slowed it down to 300, and was like, and Weta did that, and Nikki and Manny were like, yeah, that's fine. Like, it just, so we eliminated the need to actually use the Phantom. I mean, obviously the Phantom is necessary in certain applications, but if you're only going to go that slow, to not have the headache of having that second, you know, camera type, or to have that second sort of it's a whole production to have those cameras. So it just made sense to do that test early and figure it out.
Yeah. Now, do you have, with this coming out July 24th, do you have anything else in the works after this? Do you, like, when you're scheduling, do you take a certain amount of time off, or do you jump project to project?
Well, I've kind of I've only been doing this sort of the studio side for the last 5 years, and every time I sort of end up with about 6 weeks of downtime where I fix stuff around the house or do whatever.
Vacation.
Kind of, yeah. And then you get to the end of that 6 weeks, you start getting nervous, like, okay, I got to work, I got to get something going. But this is such a weird time with everything going on, and I just, I'm lucky in that I had a little bit of money saved so that I could last.
Amen.
Yeah.
But I also had a little consulting project that I did up until basically this week. So I've been busy, kind of, doing something, keeping my head, sharp. But and now it feels like the scripts are starting to kind of come in, which is kind of exciting. So I've had a few that I've been reading over the last few weeks. So it feels like the industry is starting to
get going again,
awaken from the slumber a little bit, thankfully.
To let everybody know, we are in the 7th, 8th week of COVID-19. Just to get Sean here, we did all our due diligence of wipe the room down, had masks on completely up to here, but just giving you an idea.
Drinking hand sanitizer, all the good stuff.
Yeah.
We're 8 weeks in, and everybody in the creative industry, the film industry, everybody is on edge of wondering when it's going to open, how is it going to open, and what is it going to look like because of all the precautions that we need to take. Even here, thank you, Sanctum Studios, to let us have this space. How do we handle the podcast? We had originally shot our first episode. We were going to have you in before the March release, and then it was locked down, and we all took off and said, let's just put it on hold. We wanted to keep the quality. We saw people starting to do Zoom, but we waited it out. We made a plan, and we got Sean here to talk about Mulan, which we were excited, man. I mean, it's great to have you here.
I was already excited to see the movie. Now I can't wait to see a movie.
I know, it is beautiful.
Oh,
it looks beautiful. The saturated reds, the look. Kudos to Nikki and her team and you, of the vendors, of what you guys are able to put up on the screen. I'm excited to see it. I know it's going to be another Disney staple.
Let's hope so.
I just have to ask: Did Be a Man make it in there?
In a
weird way.
I think there's like an orchestral version.
Oh, is there?
That just went over my head.
Oh, you don't remember the song in the animated?
Yeah.
Be a man.
Yeah.
I'm not going to sing it on.
No, sing it.
Yeah.
No.
Sing it.
No, it was
like one of my favorite ones when I was younger, watching the animated. For like that was always a funny one.
There are definitely moments that hopefully will be enough of a kind of reference to the original movie where fans of the original will go,
little Easter eggs for everybody.
Yeah,
that's good.
There's a couple
that's
Easter
nice.
eggs. But I mean, it was the movie turned out really, really pretty, and that is a testament to Nikki and to Mandy and to Natasha at eFilm, who colored it. I mean, there's and our vendors, Frame Store in particular, did a lot of heavy green screen lifting, where a lot of their stuff was enhancing environments that were just sets based on real locations that we went to and shot the crap out of. But these guys really did a fantastic job of putting that all together and making those worlds feel beautiful, but still real. Because it was that fine line of, all right, we don't want it to look hyper real because that's not this movie.
Right.
But we want it to feel more beautiful than the reference that we shot in China, which a lot of times was kind of overcast, or
it's like that subtle fantasy. It's like how do you bring that up without making it too much?
Yeah. But all of our vendors did a fantastic job. Image Engine was great. They built all of the sort of young Mulan world. So when she's in what we call the too low. Lose our lights.
Oh, one of our lights just went off. It's totally fine.
But and then of course ImageWorks, they built so the kind of the anchor of the movie, which is the center, the middle of the movie, which is the battle, and there's an avalanche, and like there's so much augmentation going on there, where we had a lot of people on location. We had I think at most maybe 80 dressed soldiers.
Wow.
And I think at the most we had 67. I say 67 because that was like a number that I remember we threw around a lot of meetings. 67 horses or horse riders, at any given time. But when you look at the movie, it feels like
that's a lot of cleanup, if you know what I mean.
Well, yeah, it feels exactly, and a lot more than cleanup, because it feels like there's 500 or 1,000 soldiers or 1,000 horses galloping down the hills. I mean, that's That's ImageWorks creating really great assets, and
it's amazing.
And really lovingly kind of putting those shots together where it feels like we shot it. So.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, no one really knows how much time goes into film sometimes, and sometimes people see those effects and there's an easy button. Yeah. It's time.
The animate button?
The animate button.
On the keyboard?
Well, and speaking of animation, so one thing I should say about Frame Story is that they, Laurent, who was their animation supervisor, and Hubert, their VFX supervisor, we worked very closely with those guys and with Nikki to define the Phoenix. So the Phoenix is sort of this major part of the movie that at the beginning was going to have maybe a little bit more of a kind of quirk to it, and then it was like more serious, and then it was like, so we went through a lot of different kind of,
I remember that,
like actual character development. These guys rode that wave all the way and gave us something that is beautiful and elegant and kind of hits the mark. But that was not easy to kind of find that point, that the sort of the balance, the right balance.
Yeah. As we wrap up, we're at the hour mark. We want to thank Sean Faden.
Yeah, thanks for coming by, man.
Yeah, it's really, once again, great to catch up. I mean, through this whole COVID-19, we can't see anybody. So I feel, it's good to catch up with you. Thank you, first of all, for coming out.
Yeah,
I mean,
appreciate it.
Once again, we weren't expecting anybody. It's up to them if they want to come in. We take all our precautions.
Yeah.
So what I said earlier, July 24th, Disney's Mulan live action. Go see it. You will be excited. It'll be passionate. However you see it. We don't really know how you do it, if it's limited in, seating. This is all unknown, but we are excited to have you here, and we are excited to see it.
Whichever format, buy it. That's all I can say.
So thank you for having me, guys, and I hope the information is.
Oh my God, this was so informative.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
It's fun talking about it, but I don't know if everyone wants to.
Oh no, it's
my
good. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Welcome
guys.
anytime.
Thanks,
you should come back anytime. Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, guys.